Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I'm Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of Habits of the Sea by Shea Ernshaw. This is a book coming out July 7th, 2026 from Atria Books. It's a contemporary kind of magical realism story. I received this art from NetGalley in exchange for a fair review. A romantic sojourn into magical realism, Habits of the Sea features an interesting concept and trajectory. What's it about? The night Clay Lockhart's wife dies, a violent storm tears their home and the 8 hectares of land beneath it away from the Scottish coast, sending it adrift into the Atlantic. 30 years later, 12-year-old Ellie Mills discovers the fabled floating island off the coast of Nova Scotia and finds Clay still living in the weather-worn farmhouse perched on its highest hill. When the island vanishes overnight, Ellie is left questioning whether it ever existed at all. But decades later, now in her 30s, the island resurfaces and Ellie returns, determined to uncover the truth. What she finds is even Clay hasn't aged a day. Faced with the impossible, Ellie learns that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, and that a life shaped by wonder may hold more promise than one bound by certainty. I was really into this book for the first half. I was considering it as a contender for my favorite of the month, but I will admit that my interest dropped off around the 50% mark. I think it's the magical realism issue again. I have a real kind of love-hate relationship with magical realism. If the magical aspect can be read as a metaphor or is given like a real specific reason, like in Wayward or in Blackwood's Blue Sky, I have no issue with it. But my logical brain sometimes struggles when stuff is just magical for no reason and there's like no explanation. To stress, this is more a me thing than the book, so if you really love magical realism, you'll probably find this book an absolute delight. It's beautifully written with lovely descriptions and it's easy to follow. It's very atmospheric and the tone is consistent throughout, though it's not necessarily a happy story. I understood the main character Ellie's conflicts and struggles, at least in the first bit, very well. Feeling you're not living the life you ought to be is probably pretty common, especially in our lives today when we're so bogged down with intrusive tech and surveillance pricing and the disconnect with nature that we have. I think about escaping suburbia quite often and living on a floating island in the middle of the ocean, especially if you have next to no people to miss when you're on there. I would not be opposed to. I love gardening. I love roughing it. Like, I don't know. I kind of wish when I was younger I'd been more exposed to kind of living more on the land. You know, I probably could have been, like, enjoyed being some kind of a farmer or rancher or something like that. I say that, but I don't know. I don't like spiders, though. That's the thing. Anyway, the thing is, though, the thing about this book is, though, and I understand the place is 8 acres, but is that enough to survive on? You need trees for firewood, all that sort of stuff, like soap, grains. I guess, like, there's fishing, I guess, but no real hunting or way to get more seeds and supplies, etc. I think I just wanted a bit more on that aspect. I wanted to be more of an almost survival story, or perhaps like lean into a bit more the mystery of the island. But when we got to the part that felt like it should have, been about that, about why does the island, like, okay, a floating island, sure, fine, whatever. But the fact that that time doesn't like move as fast on the island is never explained. And I kind of was like, why? At this part where it should have been kind of, that mystery should have turned into kind of the focus, it turned into this like pretty standard and not very shippable romance. So this aspect was what kind of brought the book down for me. It was obvious and inevitable, yet it lacked chemistry. I didn't really see what they had in common or what they liked about one another, as they rarely kind of had any deep conversations. There's no banter, there's no sort of conversations about hobbies, things like that. And there's no clashing, like, with Ellie being a modern woman and Clayton being from the 50s. Like, it's like in the farmhouse, she just automatically just kind of falls into this kind of traditional woman mindset. And I understand that you're in this island, there's not much you can do, but the fact that they never have any conversations about it, they never just discuss, I don't know, I would have thought that would have come up at some point. And while some of Ellie's issues are resolved kind of by the romance, because the romance kind of forces her to make a decision, kind of the issues that she has are very repetitive. The conflict, it didn't feel like a conflict anymore. I think that might have been why it kind of drifted from interesting to me, because it seemed like there was no conflict at all. Now, an external conflict does come up near the end, and I thought that part was really interesting and kind of like a forever war kind of way, if you've read that book, and brought my interest back up the last 20%. But really, the kind of 50 to 80% of the book, it dragged considerably for me, and I kind of really was struggling to kind of get to the end. I'm glad I did, because I was curious as to kind of, given the time jumps and stuff, what was going to happen. But anyway, overall though, it was a really interesting concept with a good execution, but it struggled to keep momentum in the middle. It was almost like there was three genres: magical, mystery, romance, futuristic sci-fi, that were all competing, and it didn't feel like they were woven together well enough for me. Still a really interesting book though. Still, still good. I still enjoyed it. There was just, yeah. Anyway, thank you so much to Nick Alley for the e-arc. I really appreciate it.